Hi, everyone, and welcome to Katie Couric. This week, we're focusing on a nation where 50 million citizens did not get enough to eat last year, and 17 million children went hungry. Families had to choose between paying for utilities or paying for groceries, and 42 million people relied on government assistance just to put food on the table. And of course, we're talking about the United States of America. Joining me here in the studio is Bill Ayers, Executive Director and founder of Why Hunger. And in Chicago, Vicki Esquerra, the President and CEO of Feeding America. But first, from Washington, Tom Vilsack is the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture and former Governor of Iowa. And before we begin our conversation, I'd like to say a quick thank you to our sponsor, Dove. Secretary Vilsack, you know, the numbers from this USDA report are truly staggering. 15% of the nation was food insecure at some point last year. And that sounds sort of like the ultimate euphemism. What is food insecure exactly?
Well, Katie, what it means is that at some point in time in each month, those American families had to decide how to apportion very limited nutrition to themselves, to their children, and to the family. It's an issue that we've been dealing with very seriously. It's obviously something we're very concerned about. We've begun a process of trying to make it easier for folks to qualify for some of the programs that will help them get through a tough time. And as the economy improves, our hope is that we'll see more people require less assistance and help.
Ed Krasinski asked us on Twitter, why are so many Americans struggling to have enough to eat? And I imagine that the recession has a great deal to do with it.
What's interesting about this is that only 10% of the people who are receiving SNAP benefits are receiving what we refer to as cash welfare. The other 90% are not. Many of them are senior citizens. Obviously, a lot of them are children. But many are working Americans, people who are working part-time jobs or full-time jobs that just simply don't give them enough resource to be able to put food on the table on a consistent basis throughout the year. That's why we have a SNAP program and why we have the school lunch and school breakfast programs.
And when you say SNAP, that means food stamps, correct?
It's a supplemental nutrition assistance program. It's formerly known as the food stamp program. It's a program designed to provide some assistance so that those dollars can be stretched a little bit further so that groceries can be obtained for families.
How much has the recession exacerbated this problem?
Well, we've seen a remarkable increase in the number of SNAP recipients. When we came into office, there were approximately 31 million Americans in the process of receiving food stamps or SNAP payments. Today, that number is closer to 42 to 43 million. And now part of that is because we're doing a much more aggressive outreach effort to try to get to people. A lot of states were underperforming, California, Texas, and Florida, and we did some work there, and we encouraged easier ways of qualifying. But obviously the recession has something to do with it. The good news in this report, if there is good news, is that we are now beginning to see sort of a flatlining of the increase, which means that perhaps as the economy begins to improve, we're going to see a downward trend in those numbers instead of the continued upward trend.
1 in 5 American children is poor, 1 in 7 Americans in general. But you're talking about people who aren't necessarily living in poverty. These are working Americans who are often going hungry.
That's correct. Simply because the wages they earn, either in part-time work or full-time work, simply just don't provide enough resource for them to take care of their family, as most of us would like to be able to take care of our families. That's why the SNAP program is important, and that's why the child nutrition programs are important, and it's also why the food banks are important. We've seen a tremendous surge in the need for assistance in the food banks, and fortunately we have a number of organizations, Feeding America, and one in particular that has been working very hard to make sure that folks have enough food, either by food banks or through SNAP, to make ends meet.
But these are obviously only temporary fixes, aren't they?
Bottom line is, as the economy improves, our hope is that we'll see fewer people in need of these resources and these programs. A healthy economy is ultimately the answer, and we're working very hard. The President, the Vice President, and all of us are working very hard to try to get people back to work.
And how do you reduce people's reliance, Mr. Secretary, on things like food stamps? How do you move them from using food stamps to getting back on their feet if possible?
Creating jobs that will support families, wage levels that will support families, and we're doing that. We're beginning to see an increase in employment in rural America as we are turning agricultural commodities into a variety of different things, biofuels, for example, as we expand broadband. work to build the economy in rural America. We're beginning to see a downward trend in unemployment. That's a good sign. We obviously need to do more of that, and we are focused on doing that. And I'm convinced that over the course of the next several months, we're going to continue to see some progress in building jobs. And as the economy gets stronger, then reliance on these programs will be reduced.
Let me ask you another question from Twitter. TJ2 Barker asks, how is it possible that 50 million are hungry when there is so much obesity in this country?
Well, that's a very good question, and the reality is that oftentimes there are twin problems coming out of the same source. Those who are struggling to make ends meet often take a look at how they might be able to stretch that dollar and may assume wrongly that fruits and vegetables may not be as filling and may be more expensive. So we're working very hard to do a better job of educating people about nutrition, and we're particularly focused on trying to get children to have better opportunities in schools. That's why it's important for Congress to pass the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Act that will improve the quality of the meals as well as expanding access to them.
Because the bottom line is that it's expensive to eat healthy.
Well, that's what people think. But the reality is that there are an awful lot of ways to stretch that dollar. We just need to get better information in the hands of folks. And we're trying to do that at USDA through a series of recipes. We're trying to do it through a recipe contest at schools, all designed to figure out ways in which we can use fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and low-fat dairy more creatively and less expensively. It doesn't necessarily have to be that it's always more expensive.
Before you leave, the President's Deficit Panel is mulling some deep cuts in government subsidies to farmers. Some people, including former Secretary of Agriculture Dan Glickman, think that this is the right way to go, that we shouldn't be in the business of subsidizing farmers when times are good for them. What do you think about this?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to know that 600,000 of the 800,000 farmers who are producing the bulk of what we produce and consume in this country will average about $6,400 this year, in a year where farm income is up 24% in net income from their farming operations. So the safety net is an important consideration. It's also important to note that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has already substantially reduced its reliance in terms of support by $4 billion through a redesign of the crop insurance program. So we've already begun to address deficit reduction in a very meaningful way, and we're looking forward to working with other departments to see a like opportunity created within the government.
Is it upsetting to you that people really only consider, I don't want to say only, but for the most part, this whole issue of hunger in America gets a lot of attention, particularly around Thanksgiving, where there's so much emphasis on food, or around maybe a holiday like Christmas. How can Americans do more to attack this problem and care more about it in the first place?
Well, those who are business owners can look for opportunities to hire people and put people back to work. That's obviously very important. The rest of us, I think, need to understand that this is not a struggle for these families during the Thanksgiving or holiday time. It's a struggle every single month. And it's important for us to continue to support the SNAP program and programs like that to provide nutritional assistance. And it's also important to recognize the need to donate to food banks through charities to make sure that folks can get the resources they need. And finally, if there are creative ways through the social marketing techniques to get information to folks about how they might be able to stretch their food dollar, every idea is a good idea and it needs to be publicized.
All right. Well, Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack, I know you've got a busy day and need to get going, but thanks so much for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Katie.
So, Bill and Vicki, you just heard what Secretary Vilsack said. Let me start with you, Bill. I mean, the SNAP program, food stamps, and some of the other government programs, is this enough to deal with the level of hunger in this country, and what more can be done? I know he mentioned food banks as well.
Yes, well, I think the federal government has done a great job recently, especially with the SNAP program. It's now an EBT card. It isn't those stamps, so it takes away the stigma. It also eliminates lots of the errors that were made. So the SNAP program is a wonderful program. And one of the key things that we've been trying to do is to help people to get access to it, as the Secretary was saying. And still, only about 2/3 of the people who are eligible around the country are getting SNAP. So we have a long way to go to reach the people who need it the most.
When are you eligible?
Well, there's a whole, you're eligible even if you work, and it's 185% of poverty. So people ought to find out whether they're eligible, and to do that, they need to go to their local food stamp office. Now, one of the ways they can find that is by calling our number, 1-866-3-HUNGRY. That's the National Hunger Hotline. And we run that with the Secretary, with the Agriculture Department of Food and Nutrition Services. So if you call us at that number, we can connect you to emergency food in your network, in your neighborhood, and we can also connect you to all the government feeding programs, like SNAP, Child Nutrition Programs, the WIC programs. So that number, again, if I may give it, is 1-866-3-HUNGRY, HUNGRY.
Okay. Vicki, is there still a big stigma attached to going and trying to get government assistance when you're having a hard time feeding your family?
Unfortunately, there is still a very big stigma with families that really need support and assistance. And but interestingly enough, Katie, what we're seeing in this environment where the economy has been so bad and has been bad for the last 2.5 years is that we all know someone who has lost a job, has gone through a major crisis of some kind of illness, to your point, has had to make trade-offs just in how they, spend their money. And we are doing a lot, Bill Ayers and Feeding America is doing a lot, as other organizations are, to really reduce that element of stigma, because we know that we can reach more people. We, as I said, we all know that we know someone who's really struggling right now, and so reducing that stigma is a very important part of our work.
I know that the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Bill that Secretary Vilsack just mentioned passed the Senate a few months ago. It's before the House. It was originally, $10 billion, and now it's been cut to 4.5. But Vicki, I know you're of the mind that it needs to be passed because it's a crisis situation.
We are absolutely of the mind that Congress should come back together before the end of this year and pass this bill. To your point, almost 1 in 4 kids in this country is living in a food insecure household. There is no reason in the United States of America that our children, which are the nation's most valuable resource, should not have enough food. And we believe that $4.5 billion, although not the $10 billion we'd hoped for, is a good place to start, and we are very much in favor and actually doing everything we can to get this bill passed before the end of the year.
Bill?
I agree with Vicki on that, but let's take a look at the whole situation. The president wanted $10 billion, $1 billion for the next 10 years to be added to the child nutrition programs. And most of that money would go to school lunch, school breakfast, and after-school meals. And it would be to improve the quality of the meals and also to get more kids into the meals. We believe, Vicki, and I agree, I think, that no child should be going hungry when, in fact, they could be being fed not only at home but in the school. So we give kids free books because we believe that they need to learn. We give them free transportation because they have to get to school. It's been proven over and over again that nutrition aids cognition, that if in fact a child is not eating, they're not learning very well, and they act out in school. So if you want children to learn, you should not only be providing free books and free transportation, but free food.
Well, the taxpayers pay for it. We should say it's not totally free,
That's
right?
No, but we as a country
Yes.
have decided that we will do that for our children.
Right.
We will give them free books, and we will give them, you're right, it's the taxpayers. We will give them transportation money. It comes out of our budgets. But why not do the same thing for food? Because, in fact, it's been proven that kids learn better when they're eating, and every teacher will tell you that. So we're in favor of getting this bill passed, even though we think it's totally inadequate. And the thing that's bad about it is that of that $4.2 billion that's going in, $2.2 billion has been taken away from the SNAP program. And we think that's a mistake, and that money ought to be restored. And I think we both agree on that. We're very sad that we're not getting what the House wanted, which was $8 billion, but they couldn't come up with the money. Mm-hmm. So it's the best of a bad situation.
Yeah, it's a hard time, isn't it, Vicki, to really be pushing this as an issue, because unfortunately some of the dollars have dried up along with the recessions as well, so people aren't able to be as generous as maybe they have in the past. Of course, There are a lot of people. The great divide, the economic divide is huge in this country. But do you have a hard time, Vicki, getting traction sometimes for this issue? Because it's also so widespread. There's not one particular face that represents hunger in America.
It can be difficult. I would tell you that, to your point, more and more Americans are coming to our food banks and to the government for assistance. We saw in a recent piece of research that we did, Katie, that there was an increase in individuals coming to our food banks to the tune of 67% for the very first time.
Absolutely.
More and more Americans, more and more of the middle class, are really struggling with this very, very elongated recession. And so it's interesting in that much of our work is just to get the message out, to get people in to either volunteer, to donate food or funds, and to advocate for people that don't have much of a voice right now. And that's exactly what we've been doing with the Secretary on really pushing this bill forward. I will tell you, I'm very concerned if we don't get this bill done this year that we will lose $4.5 billion that goes to kids' programs in school. It also goes to really important programs after school, on the weekends, and during the summer, which are really vulnerable times for children.
Yeah.
You know, when they're out of school, there's just not the safety net that there is when they're involved in the school.
And who's advocating for these kids? Obviously, the two of you are, but I mean, do you have a champion on Capitol Hill? Do you have somebody who is actually really pushing for this?
Yes.
I know Senator Kennedy was a big advocate.
He certainly was. Senator Leahy for many years has been. And a number of people in the Congress are as well. George Miller and
George McGovern has been a huge advocate.
Yeah, but and also Jim McGovern now up in Massachusetts. George McGovern certainly was,
Yes.
but Jim McGovern now has been really a champion. So we've got those kind of people. Vicki has done a great job, by the way, in reaching out to more people to get them to donate food and money, and also to get people signed up to the program. And we've found in our, as you know, this is our Hungerthon time right now, and we found the last 2 years that we didn't go down in our donations, which was a real blessing for us, and we hope this year we will again. I'd like to suggest to all of you, if you want to help us out, you can go to hungerthon.org, and I do also want to thank Yoko Ono. We have this wonderful shirt. I hope you can all see that, folks.
Yeah, well, yeah, hold it up a little
Yeah,
bit higher.
I'll hold it
That's
up there.
actually really cool.
Isn't that a great
designed
shirt?
that?
No,
or she
but
gave you permission
she gave
to
us
use
permission
Imagine?
to, and yeah, and we do this with the Hard Rock Cafe. Around the world, we raise money for international hunger, but here we're doing it for hunger in America. So if you make a donation, you get one of these T-shirts or sweatshirts or a pin. We want to thank Yoko Ono for that.
Are there any other organizations, Vicki, that you think people can, you know, because I do think this is a time where families really want to reach out and help other families, and it should last all year long, but particularly now, and maybe we can emphasize the importance of this not just taking place over Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
But how else can the average person help?
It's a great point. Thank you for asking the question, Katie. So we would encourage them to go to feedingamerica.org. They can actually go on our website and give to their food bank in their local community. We know everyone really is involved in wanting to help their local community and their neighbors today, and so I'd encourage that as well. I also want to go back to a question that you mentioned around who is the hugest advocate, and I'm going to put it right back in the lap of our president, who said he wanted to end childhood hunger by 2015. He has done a lot to help us. We need to continue to encourage him to stay focused, to your earlier point, not only on issues of health and obesity, but on hunger, because they are all related. And so I'm encouraging President Obama to get right back in the wagon with us on this issue of hunger in America.
You know, you guys should get Google to put it on their homepage the day before Thanksgiving and to have some kind of link to where people can go to donate money for hunger, because I think you would get a huge response, don't you?
Yeah, we should do that. I don't know. We've been working with Google, but I don't know if we're on for the day before Thanksgiving. I'll have to check that out.
Or something, or, you know, around this time of year where people are really looking for ways. In addition, I think, Vicki, as you said, it's so important to help in your own community, but sometimes people want to have a national impact as well.
And also, let your congressperson and your senator let your voice be heard to that person and say, hey, listen, let's get this legislation passed, the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Bill. As Vicki said, it's very, very important, because money isn't going to just start flowing. It's going to recede, if anything. So now's the time to go get it.
And Vicki, what about food banks? You talked about how there are a lot more people going to food banks for the first time. I think you said a 67% increase. And I know we did a story or a series of stories a while back about how food banks were really struggling to keep up with the demand. What is the latest on that?
So we have in the last year seen about a 40% increase in people coming to our food banks for additional assistance. I can tell you people are really working hard across the country right now to meet the demand. Another interesting statistic that kind of lowers the stigma around people that need help. They don't need help all the time. The majority of people that we work with really provide most of their support most of the time. We see about 6 million people every week in food banks. And to the earlier discussion, over 70% of our food banks today, Katie, are doing some kind of outreach around signing up our clients because they're investing with us to government programs. So getting them signed up for SNAP benefits, getting them signed up for free and reduced lunch, for WIC and so forth. So it's really a great place to go in a very, very busy time right now.
Let me ask you some more Twitter questions because I think we got some good ones. One was, do you have enough volunteers? You mentioned, getting people to come and help. Where can people volunteer, and do you have enough?
So we have over 1 million volunteers that help us around the year. You can imagine right now everyone wants to volunteer in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. We love our volunteers. So you can go to feedingamerica.org. Go right in and volunteer at your local food bank. I would encourage volunteers to the earlier point that you made. Hunger is a crisis that really happens every day of the year. And so we need people to volunteer throughout the year, not just during the holiday season.
Absolutely.
And we have another question. Let me throw this one at you, Bill. A Twitter or Facebook question. I'm not sure which it was. But why do grocery stores throw out food and not let people come to pick it up or donate it?
Well,
some of them do donate it, don't
absolutely. And Vicki has done a great job of collecting that. That's called food rescue, and it's a very, very big business now. And so if your food store doesn't do that, you should contact Vicki's organization, and they can find an organization locally. Like here at City Harvest that goes around and does that. Out where I live, it's Long Island Harvest. And they go and pick up the food from restaurants, sometimes from food stores, from clubs, from all kinds of events, and they bring it in so that it can be used by food pantries, soup kitchens, and homeless shelters.
Are there liability issues involved at all?
Yeah, but there are legal, benefits that help people and laws that protect people in those situations.
Gee, I think, Vicki, I think 20 years ago I did a piece on this guy who started this organization called the D.C. Central Kitchen. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. I think his name is Robert.
We know him very
well. Yeah, Robert Eggers. Sure, he's a good friend of ours. We've honored him.
I thought it was such a fantastic idea. He took leftovers from restaurants and I guess food stores, and he then taught homeless people how to cook and prepare food. So then they got the training.
Absolutely.
And then they would serve
program.
it at shelters. And then they would ultimately, hopefully, if things went well, go into various jobs in the restaurant industry, which I thought was such a genius idea.
One of the things
Katie,
that we
you
do...
should see how...
Oh, go ahead.
You should see how that's grown today.
It has grown enormously.
It started back then. Today, our network of food banks uses retail pickup programs from every major retailer. And this past year, they were donated over 400 million pounds of food that would have otherwise gone in landfills. So that concept is giving today to families that need it milk, eggs, produce, meat, all of those fabulous things that these families need are coming in from great companies across the country that are really doing their part to help.
It's so nice.
Story.
It's so nice to hear about corporate responsibility in this regard, and we should do a story on that. I think, but during this holiday season and show what's being done, and if there are other programs like Robert Eggers. Obviously, it had a big impact on me because I did it something like 20 years ago.
And you can remember.
One of the things that we do at Why Hunger is we go around the country and we find innovative programs. Not just food programs, but job training programs, housing programs, childcare, healthcare, and we highlight those on our website. We also try to connect them to each other. It's a program that we started 20 years ago, And it's helped to bring together organizations that have very, very good ideas but need resources. And we try to raise money for them so that they can spread those good ideas all over the country.
And finally, our producers, we were talking before the show about how, everybody knows somebody, sadly, who has cancer, right? Or you can see the impact of this sort of right before your eyes. But not everybody knows someone necessarily or is aware that someone they know is hungry.
That's
and I'm just
changing,
wondering
though.
if I could ask you in closing, is there a story or someone you've met that epitomizes this problem who, maybe we wouldn't expect, or something that happened to someone so people could realize this is such a widespread, challenging problem? Can you put a face to this?
Yes, absolutely.
I
We
can.
get calls every day on our National Hunger Hotline, the number I gave before,
Yeah, you don't have to give it again.
800-866. Okay, all right. And we get calls from these people. And
We'll put it on the site, by the way.
Great. And what we're finding is that there are men calling who've never called before. And they call us up and say, I'm out of work. I've never been out of work. I have to feed my family. We have calls from people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan who've served their country, and now they're hungry. We get calls from their families while they're over in Iraq and Afghanistan. So this face that we're talking about is the face that's in your neighbor next door. It's the face of somebody that you've known for many years who's never been hungry, and now they are. That's the kind of crisis we're facing.
And what about you, Vicki? Is there an image that comes to your mind?
There is, Katie. I have honestly the great honor of serving this wonderful network of food banks. And I'm actually out every week doing my best to meet with clients. And about a month ago, I was in Las Vegas with our executive director. We went into a school because we were interested in opening a backpack program and a kids cafe program, both of which serve kids in the weekend and in the evening. And this little boy walked into the principal's office. His name was Max. He had his head down, and he had a box with him. And he asked if he could talk with the principal of the school. And so she walked out, and when she came back, she said, that is an 8-year-old boy. He had his toys with him. And he said, I brought my toys to school today because my mother lost her job last week, and I'm wanting to know if there's a place I can sell my toys. And I think it's a real reminder to all of us that children who are 8 years old shouldn't be worried about selling their toys to help provide for their families. But there are millions of stories like that across America. And sometimes the numbers that Bill and I talk about are so big, I think people lose sight about what can they do to help. But they can call either one of our organizations, and they can volunteer, they can advocate, they can donate, and help 17 million children today.
All right. Well, Vicki Iscara and Bill Ayers, I thank you both so much.
Thank
and
you.
Hopefully
Thank you, Katie.
people are watching this. We will put your information on the website and, and urge people to care about this issue all year long. Thank you both, and happy Thanksgiving to both of you, and thank you for everything you do to bring attention to this.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. To find out how you can help, you can visit whyhunger.org and feedingamerica.org. You can also find links to those sites at cbsnews.com. From all of us here at CBS News, happy Thanksgiving. Now stay tuned for a message from our sponsor, Dove.